Restaurant Unstoppable. Inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef owner of Giusto, Chef Kevin O'Donnell. My man, Kevin, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling good.
Dude, I'm psyched to be here. Your episode originally 269. We recorded way back in 2016. A lot has happened in your life since then, so I cannot wait to pick up where we left off. The last time we talked to you were at SRV in Boston. That was, again, in 2016. You are now in Newport, Rhode Island with Giusto, your first solo project where you're the sole proprietor, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct, yeah.
So we're going to dive into the details, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
I think it's so important to keep moving. You just got to keep going, keep moving, looking ahead and not stop. Don't be afraid to evolve.
I love it, man. So how has that kind of rang true in your life recently?
I mean, recently, since day one, I've always loved like new challenges and new things and, you know, being just thrown stuff to feel almost overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's since Giusto's opened, it's been just a nonstop challenge, nonstop curveballs, nonstop need to evolve and think, you know, 5 steps ahead.
Yeah. When you're feeling overwhelmed, how do you handle that? And this actually came up in our first interview. I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so 9 times out of 10 when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I thrive. That's when like all of my senses are just on high alert. I'm focused. I'm like hyper, you know, all over everything. And I'm actually usually much more clear-minded when I have a lot going on.
There's science to support that. I remember back from my when I was studying to become a commercial pilot, we had to do a humans factors course, and there's a bell curve that is associated with stress and performance. And there's a peak of like when you're slightly stressed out, it's when you optimize, is when your performance is optimal. And once you hit like a threshold, it like plummets. It goes straight down. But on the backside, if you're like fat, dumb, and happy and you're not stressed out, then the same thing starts to happen. You start to drop the ball on things. So it's a really pretty bell curve that they've been able to distinguishedly map out. So you're right on, man.
Yeah, and it's like to feel stagnant and to not be constantly doing something that's productive and I'm learning and I'm feeling engaged, then that's when I feel stagnant. And that's when I let my guard down, I get lazy, or when I'm on, I'm on. And when I'm relaxed, my brain is shut off and that's it. You know, which is good. It's like work hard, play hard, and I chill hard too. So
I love it, man. So kind of paint the picture for us. Last time we spoke, and again, if you're just listening to this episode or maybe you just started listening to Restaurant Unstoppable, you weren't listening back in episodes, the 200s, hit pause, go back to restaurantunstoppable.com/269, and we will have the first interview right there waiting for you if you want to kind of listen to Chef Kevin's early career. Today we're picking up where we left off. So that was 2016. Paint that picture. Where were you in 2016? What was going on?
So 2016, that was our second year of SRV in Boston.
What's SRV stand for?
The Serene Republic of Venice.
Is it like, did you guys just like that also like phonetically spells out serve?
Yeah.
Was that?
That was like our joke.
Okay.
The general manager at the time, Ted Hawkins, who's now the director of operations for that restaurant group and a partner at SRV,
past
which is
guest on
so
the show.
Cool, so amazing to see.
We also had Ted on the show. You should listen to that one too.
Yeah, great guy. So he used to call it Serve Bar and Grill, just like as a joke, you know, Serve Bar and Grill. But yeah, SRV was in its second year. We had just been nominated for James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in the country. We just got nominated, or we were just awarded with Best Italian, Best New Restaurant in Boston. Wow. They were like, it was just kept coming. It was an amazing time. SRV was and still is such a special place.
What made it special?
The passion, the dedication from the team. You know, the fact that it was a really unique restaurant. I think from concept to design to execution.
What made it unique?
Well, first of all, I mean, SRV, the Serene Republic of Venice, you know, we've stayed fairly true, and they do to this day. Obviously, now I talk about it in past tense because I'm not a part of it anymore. But you know, it's still a part of me.
It's still one of your babies. You helped create it.
Cicchetti, the Venetian snacks, the bar snacks. That is such a fun kind of wine bar, snack bar scene in Venice. And we tried to recreate that. And I think we did a really great job of that. It's so much fun. You bounce around to all these different wine bars in Venice, snacking, drinking little half glasses of wine, and just having fun.
Yeah.
So we created this little Cicchetti bar area in the restaurant, which was a ton of fun. Standing room only, snacks, it was legit.
That's a great way to bump up against people too. I feel like when you're at a bar and you're sitting in a seat, your job, but we recently had somebody on the show to talk about the history of bars and just restaurants in general, and how back in like the, more so in like the 18th century and the 19th century, they really helped form societies, and they played a huge role in towns. Like, you went to the restaurant, the bar, the public house for more than just drinks. You went for your news, you went for politics, you went for meetings. It was where people got together and were community. And we've gotten away from that. But I like this idea of having standing room only. Paint the dynamic of that, and how that is different than maybe being forced to sit in one spot.
I mean, you're absolutely right. You just nailed it. In Venice, it's all the farmers markets. It's the fishermen. It's the farmers going in there at 8 o'clock in the morning to these bars and having a half a glass of wine for breakfast with some snacks. And that's when they're sharing their news, and you nailed it. So we wanted to recreate that. And it's like fun, vibrant, low key, just like stand around, meet people, talk to people, communal area. It's great energy. It's good fun. And
every night, so I feel like in my mind, I'm seeing a party, and I don't know about you guys, but when I go to a party, I'm typically not a wallflower. I float, and I feel like what's cool about taking the chairs away is you let people float, and you bump up against people, and you meet people, and that's why we go to bars now, like to meet people, to bump up and to socialize. I think it's something you don't see very often, but I think it's super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So that was the second year in SRV. I was having a blast. I was learning. I was cooking new food. I was challenged, and my partner, one of my partners, Michael Lombardi, he and I are both chefs, and we were cooking some great food, and they still are, and it was a ton of fun. So that was 2016.
I do remember one of the things that stood out to me and I thought was really impressive, and you didn't see it a lot in 2016, but you're seeing it more of it now, is this idea of bringing the mill into the restaurant. Who else was doing that back then?
I mean, excuse me, nobody was. And that's, again, that's at least not in Boston. We were inspired by, Mark Vetri in Philly, who was milling in a smaller capacity. We had visited 4-Star Farms in Massachusetts, and when we first opened the restaurant, or when we were conceptualizing the restaurant, freshness, quality ingredients, cooking great food, delicious and unique. Those are the things that were coming to our mind. And how do we do that? So, Michael and I love making pasta. We actually met working in Italy together, and we bonded over making pasta. Everybody would go off, and I think we talked about this in our first episode, was that, working in the restaurant together, we were closed in between lunch and dinner in Italy, and all the other cooks and everybody else in the restaurant would go take a siesta, or go out and go back home, chill out or whatever. And Michael and I would stay back in the restaurant, and we'd just make pasta, and we'd bond, and we'd cook. And, it's like we're in Italy to learn. We're not going to like take a siesta. We don't care about that. We can rest when we come home, but
this is our time.
This is our time. We're trying to learn.
Exactly. When you're there on their time, you're there, you're learning. But when you get that free time, like, that's where you really get to push the envelope and try new things.
Exactly.
I love that. And one other thing I love about the mill is that I think that it also helps. I mean, and you can speak much better to this, but what type of flexibility does that give you in the kitchen as far as being able to try different things?
I mean, it opens up, the flexibility is endless, so coming up with this idea of, okay, we love making pasta. How can we be different? There's a ton of great Italian restaurants in Boston, great chefs making great pasta. How can we differentiate ourselves aside from just technique?
Yeah.
It's the ingredients. Yeah. So if we can source heirloom grains from different farms, starting with Massachusetts, where we were, using locally grown, sustainably sourced and delicious fresh grains that we mill in the restaurant, that would set us apart. So, we were able to find specific grains, and it took a lot of trial and error to create a pasta flour blend that we were really happy with, and that kept evolving, and we would try new grains and different varieties of ancient wheats, and it was a ton of fun.
But that's all story that you can bring to the consumer and create that experience of like, this isn't just handmade pasta. This is handmade pasta from heirloom grains that came from this farm. And like, people love that. And not to mention it's better for your community.
It's better for you. It's better for your body too.
Yeah. And this is where I think the food system is going is just really trying to like, especially we're talking with the NFTs coming up and people being able to tie the transparency that allows, if your fish that you're eating, which hook it came off of, down to like the fisherman's name who caught the fish, you can trace things with that type of like preciseness now. So when you're doing all this work to make the best food possible, and you can tell a story behind that, like that all has to show up, right?
Absolutely. I mean, people love the story. People want to know where their food's coming from, and it gave and still gives, I say gave again, but it gives the service team at the restaurant something to be proud about and talk about at the table with the guests and educate everybody, and everybody's learning and trying something new. And that's exciting, and
there's another side of this story, right? That's the obstacle is the way approach, right? Doing it the hard thing because it's the best thing. But how does that cause trouble for business sometimes?
I think, that's a good question. It causes a lot of trouble, but it causes more, a decision like that caused more good than it did trouble. The trouble, the things that we found were, okay, we're milling this flour in-house. You have to sift out, use a sieve to sift out the bran. 'Cause you can use some bran, but if you're trying to use whole wheat flour, it can't be the whole wheat and that's it, because the pasta needs gluten and there's no gluten in the bran. So the pasta just fall apart or wouldn't have the same chew and structure to it. So, having a byproduct of bran, in a pasta restaurant where we're milling a ton of pasta flour and bread flour too. All the breads were made with, freshly stone ground flour as well. So we were left with a decision. Okay, what do we do with this bran? Like, it was an ungodly amount of bran. We're asking pig farmers and our chicken farmer, and just asking everybody, what can you do with this bran? We had the bakery down the street, Madeline Cafe Madeline. We were friendly with the chef there. We were just like giving bran away. Like, what? Make some fun bran muffins or do something with it. It's like you can only do so much with cream of wheat, basically.
Could you start a brand concept where you just sell brand from your powder mill restaurant to?
We tried, man. Oh my god, we could at a certain point we couldn't even give it away. So there's like an internal challenge that we had, or internal struggle that we had. It's like, we're making this beautiful product, but while making this beautiful product, we're also unfortunately being somewhat wasteful.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate.
But it at the same time, like, when you create waste in a restaurant, if you're a smart enough restaurateur, you can look at that waste and see opportunity. You see this with, like, in the kitchen, when we're like, don't throw the byproduct away, make a stock out of it,
right?
And then make a soup, right? And make that into money. I can see that being difficult with brand, though.
It was tough because it's so much. We had so much. So, you're absolutely right. It forced creativity and, making brand stock for the pastas, to, instead of using water, use brand stock, or making, different porridges, or, coating the bread in it, or using it. Yeah. There's a million things you can do with it, but at a certain point, there's so much of it that it's tough to use up.
What about operational standpoint, where now, how hard is it to make flour that you can use to make pasta?
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of logistical challenges with milling the flour. First of all, it's not a shelf-stable product, so that in and of itself is a challenge, right? Now, something that before you go and buy a bag of flour off the store off the shelf, or you at a restaurant, you receive a 50-pound bag of flour. It can sit in your dry storage room for 6 months without any problems. As soon as those grains come in, you can store them at room temperature, but when you mill it, it has to be refrigerated. So now you have to think about more refrigeration space. You have to think about, rotating the product to make sure that the first, you use first, right? But then it's also, because it's not shelf stable, you have to worry about how much you're milling at a time. You definitely don't want it to go bad or rancid. When you make the dough, it reacts differently. So, there's a learning curve there. And because we're using single varietal heirloom grains, it wasn't like going to buy a bag of King Arthur bread flour or, Caputo 00 pasta flour, where that's not just one grain. They're taking in a lab samples of 10 different grains from that season or that year and blending them together to make the perfect protein structure and have a consistent product that's the same year over year.
See, that's the part in my mind where you need somebody. This is a skilled position. You're not hiring somebody off the street and say, we're going to start you off in the mill. You got to teach that person how to do this. Is it just like any other recipe where there's measurements and you get, you mill this much wheat and then that gives you this much. And when you get to this amount of grams, then that goes into, is it that simple or is there more to it?
There's more to it for sure. I mean, it's basically like that, but a lot of the recipe development was done by the chef team, the great chef team there with, when I was there, it was, Michael and I, obviously, we had a chef de cuisine, Tyler Chase, who was amazing. Meg Thompson was the pastry chef at the time. She's brilliant. Great sous chef team. Just, we had a lot of brains involved in the development of the recipes. And we had a couple throughout the, 4.5 or so years that I was there, we had a couple really amazing pasta makers there as well. And some of them were able to get involved with that, development of the recipes. And some others were able to execute the recipes really well, but maybe weren't part of the development of it. So more of taking a recipe and executing it rather than helping us develop the hydration ratio, how much egg to how much egg yolk, or maybe it's a water, which might change based on how much, how coarsely ground it is, or how much bran is in the flour, or, what variety of wheat it is, might take a different hydration ratio. What's the shape of the pasta would take a different, there's a million different variables that come into play there. But the benefit of it is, while it's a huge challenge to deal with this fresh milled flour, something else that's important, especially in a restaurant, is you have to not only be unique and stand out to your guests, but you have to be unique and stand out to people that want a job. So if you're not thinking about that as you are creating your concept or as you are coming up with your menus, then you're not going to attract talent. You're not going to retain talent. You're not going to stand out in the talent pool where there's a million jobs out there. So, there's some jobs that are going to pay a line cook $25 an hour, $30 an hour. Those jobs aren't most likely are not going to be the ones that are going to be able to offer education and making food from scratch and all these other things. Choosing to mill your own flour is a financial investment as well. It's not paying 80 cents.
You're not saving money,
flour.
I'm guessing.
Absolutely not. Normally you look at a restaurant that does pasta, homemade breads, and pizza, for example. We didn't do pizza at SRV, but those are just predominantly flour-based foods. Flour is commercially or industrial is a fairly cheap commodity item, right?
Yeah, it's units of work. When you're I don't know how many thousands of pounds of flour get milled a day, but that's how you keep the cost low, is because it's units of work. But when you choose to take that in house, by cutting out the middleman there, you're not doing yourself really any favors as far as saving money. You're creating a lot of work for yourself.
Right.
And it's not just hiring somebody off the streets. It's somebody that you need to train. It's a skill. So I guess the whole reason why I want to bring this in is because there's things it takes a lot of, it's expensive to do food right. And to give yourself these types of creative freedoms. And I think it's important that if we want food done right, that's the best version that you can put in your body, we need to communicate this to the consumer and say, listen, this is going to be expensive, and you need to know down to the penny what it's going to cost you to execute this, because it's really going to affect your bottom line. So was this a challenge, or is this a challenge?
I think for some people, but we're still talking about SRV. So what SRV does really well is education, and not only to the kitchen team, but for the service team, and if a server, a bartender, a manager, a food runner, anybody is comfortable enough to explain the process and to help answer questions to the guests sitting at the table. Why is this bowl of pasta this much money? Or why are the prices like this? Or what is Einkorn wheat or, Bluebeard Durham wheat? What is that? If that food runner, server, bartender, whoever can answer that question and educate the guests and get them excited about it and tell that story, the history, then, I think if people know what they're putting in their body and they understand how much effort and thought and, good went from getting to that point, then, things that you put in your body are almost, for me personally, it's invaluable. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to spend almost anything on something that's good for my body. And I
think that's the direction consumerism is going, because we're starting to realize if you follow the money, like over the past 10, 15 years, there's been like this huge movement towards people being like getting stupid geeked out over how can I get the best thing. And the best thing we're starting to realize now, this gets into biodiversity and regenerative farming, and we're realizing that if the ecosystem of the earth is healthy, then that produces the best tasting, most healthy food. And we're tracing it back. So I do believe that consumerism is going to transform the industry. And I think the restaurant industry is the hinge between the consumer, because they come and they sit at your table and you do everything you just said. They educate the guests on why this is the best thing for you. And that's why I do believe the restaurant industry is going to transform the world.
Yep, I agree.
It's powerful stuff. But from an operational standpoint, like for people listening to this and they're like, I want to do that, what do you need to know? What did you learn the hard way? Like, what were you excited about when you first got started, and what did you realize after, I think you were there for 4 years, right?
Yeah. So with the flour milling specifically, I think when we first opened, we thought we could sift it by hand, and boy, were we wrong. We tried to make all these, homemade kind of contraptions to help us sift them. Pretty clever ideas, but when Michael and I visited 4 Star Farms in Massachusetts, who has a industrial grain mill, they're growing the wheat, they're milling the wheat. I think they focus mostly on corn or like cornmeal right now. We saw the mill. We bought the same mill, a smaller version of it, but the same industrial mill from North Carolina, stone burr mill. So I think, that was a great move. We saw their sifter to remove the bran and get fine flour from it. It was huge, an enormous. It almost doubled the price of the mill. It would double the space that we needed to do it, and we had to make that decision. Okay, wait, it's a restaurant. You got to pay X amount per square foot. You only, almost every restaurant in the world always needs more space. So space is so valuable in a restaurant. We're like, you know what? We can hand sift it. We'll try to hand sift it. And
but how much is labor?
Oh my God.
Yeah. This is thinking like a restaurateur. This is thinking, okay, I spend $10,000 today and I save how much over the next 5 years? Right. By like, what's it going to cost me to pay 5 people? How many people would it take? What did that process look like?
So we had one full-time person making pasta, and then a couple people kind of assisting throughout the course of the week. And then our pastry chef, Megan, she was also assisting with the milling process, making all the breads with the flour. So yeah, there was definitely a few people involved in that.
What would your labor expense be to shift flour, if you had to guess?
To sift it?
Yeah.
Well, when we were doing it by hand, doing it by hand is almost like anybody could do it. So it didn't have to be, the most expensive hourly person or salary position.
But minimum wage, $15 an hour.
Yeah, at least $15 an hour, And then after probably about 6 months or a few months, we were able to come up with a solution that we found a company that developed sieves for, I think it was in like sifting dirt for metal, like precious metals, and it was basically a vibrating sieve that worked, but it was on like 8 hours a day. So who knows what that electric bill was? In hindsight, if we had just had a little bit more space and built that automatic sifter that 4 Star Farms had that we saw when we were conceptualizing it, it would have been much easier.
Yeah, but this type of information right here is gold for somebody who is listening to this and is inspired by this, maybe wants to recreate it someplace else. Like, these are the things you just don't know until you know, right?
Yeah.
So any other things worth bringing to the conversation during the 4 years that you were with SRV before leaving. So I'm trying to pick up where we left off, and I want to make sure we get any evolutionary points for you as a restaurateur during this time.
Yeah, I mean, this was my first, SRV was my first venture as a partner, as a co-owner of a business, let alone a restaurant. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to work at some really great restaurants that not only were great chefs, but I also worked for a couple really great chef owners.
Yeah.
So I got to see, and I think that's so important, that if you are a chef specifically and you want to open your own restaurant, you need to work with somebody that's a chef owner so that you can learn from somebody that you are going to be in that position one day. And then you should also work at a restaurant where there's not a chef owner, so you can see the other side. That's maybe there's work at a restaurant that the owners don't even operate the restaurant, because you need to see there's value in each of those businesses. You know, the value that you might see in working in a restaurant that the owners do not operate it, and they're an investment firm, or it's just a hobby or a passion project or whatever it is. They're looking at it most likely from the financial side, and that's their number one. It's kind of driving decision-making process.
And it's this kind of stuff that made me want to start this podcast, because I had parents that opened a restaurant when I was 3, and they were that first version where they were in it every day, right? And lines out the door every weekend, and we struggled to pay the mortgage. And I remember looking at other restaurants where the owners were never there, and they're on vacation. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, what are we missing? And that's what was really, you know, driving me to start this podcast, is to learn about these things that you're talking about, the systems and processes and all those things that play into it. But for the listeners who chose not to take my advice and go back to episode 269, why don't you just real quick, like, rifle off, like, without getting into detail, just like the path you took, the stops you made along the way.
So grew up in Rhode Island, always worked in restaurants since a very young age, dishwasher, busboy. Yeah. You know, I was a server at a time. I was prep cook, line cook. You know, I did everything in the restaurants, and I predominantly worked when I was younger, in my late teens, in like mom and pop pizza places in my hometown, and then found this restaurant right after graduating from high school. I was kind of a lost kid, you know, didn't want to go to college, made that decision in high school. I didn't take any college prep courses, didn't even take the SATs. I was a junior in high school and college, in high school, and I was like, I'm not going to college. I made that decision. A lot of it was because I didn't want to have debt, but I also kind of hated school when I was that age. So
we get into this in the first episode. You've given us great detail. Just tell us the stops you made. Literally the names, the mentors and the names of the restaurants. That's all I want to hear.
So high school was the first great restaurant that I had the mentor that inspired me to go to college, to Johnson Wales, Walter Slater.
Okay.
And he, you know, inspired me. That was my foot into college, which led me to do an internship at Italy. So if I didn't work for Walter, I wouldn't have gone to Johnson & Wales. If I didn't go to Johnson & Wales, I wouldn't have internshipped in Italy.
Came back to the States,
where I met my next mentor, Lorenzo Pellegri, in Umbria.
Okay.
That's where I fell in love with Italian food, had an amazing time, came back to the United States after, and I met my next mentor, Aaron Edwards, who actually works with me now here. So he and I
talking about him
are
later,
back together.
I'm sure.
You know, he had an Italian restaurant in Rhode Island that was great, and I just, like, my passion for Italian food kept growing. I was with him for a year, and then Lorenzo back in Italy called me to move back out. Went back out there for 2.5 years. That's when I lived there in Italy, countryside, had a car. You know, I felt like part of that culture, and I traveled the whole country, learned everything about Italian food and culture and wine, had an amazing time, had to come back home. You know, I can't live in Italy my whole life. It just wasn't realistic. And that's where I met Michael, my partner from SRV, where we opened up together. He and I became great friends. He ended up moving to New York to work at Del Posto, which has since closed. But what an amazing restaurant. Mark Ladner was the chef there. When I'd started, they had 2 Michelin stars. They had just gotten their 4th. They'd just gotten 4 New York Times stars, which was like unheard of for an Italian restaurant. What a cool, like, special time to be in New York and working at Del Posto. Had an amazing time there. I was like climbing the ladder, just got promoted, loving New York, having fun. You know,
phone rings,
and an opportunity came up, and you know, this is like another real thing that I believe in, is like not passing up and just follow. You know, if something feels right, it felt right to do this. I had an opportunity to go to Paris and open a restaurant, and I never in my career had ever said like, oh, one day I dream to go work in Paris. That wasn't my drive. It wasn't a dream of mine. And, you know, I was so focused on Italian food. All I cared about was Italian restaurants and learning about regional Italian cooking. But why the hell would you turn down this opportunity to go to Paris and open up a restaurant as the chef? So,
well, I got to jump in here. Sometimes you got to take a step back or a side step to go forward, right?
Yeah.
If you're someplace and the canopy's only so high at Del Posto. I mean, there's tons of opportunity that's going to create for you, but you have people ahead of you, you know? So sometimes you got to take a step aside to have a higher ceiling or whatever. And I don't know if that's what this was for you. And I realize we're trying to go through this quickly, so I don't want to slow you down, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, that's right. You know, it's like, there's always going to be another amazing Italian restaurant in the United States that I could work at.
Yeah.
When am I ever going to have an opportunity to open up a restaurant as the executive chef of a restaurant in Paris, France?
Exactly.
Like that opportunity doesn't just get like thrown at you all the time.
Great resume builder too.
And it is a great resume builder. And it just opened my eyes to a whole nother culture, a whole nother style of cooking and people. I absolutely fell in love with Paris and the people, and, you know, all the restaurateurs and chefs that I met there were so open and, you know, helping, and it was an amazing experience.
So you're there for a year.
I was there for a year, and, you know, at a certain point, I didn't plan to go to France, so I was like, I got to go home again. I can't live in France the rest of my life, as much as this is an amazing experience. So I decided to move back home, and now I'm married now. My wife and I, we were dating at the time. We moved up to Boston together. So I moved back from Paris. Her and I moved up to Boston. That's where I met Jim Koshner and Mike Moxley, who used to own the Salty Pig together. Now it's just Jim Koshner. And I worked there for a few years and had a great time, you know, working with Jim, and Michael ended up coming up and working at Salty Pig. So we had a great time at Salty Pig, and that's where we all came together to come up with the concept of SRV. And then, so Michael and I left and Salty Pig and opened up SRV with Jim Koshner and Mike Moxley.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for going through that.
That's to SRV.
So that was the fast forward version of episode 269. If you want the details, go back and listen to that episode. So you're at SRV. Any other, I think where we left off, any other key lessons you learned, about business? This is your first partnership. We talked about a little bit in the first episode about the dynamics of partnership. It's, you know, you can go faster alone, but you can go much further together is a saying I like. After now 6 years of working in a partnership, or is it 5 years? 5 years of working in a partnership. Any lessons about partnerships that you learned that are serving you today at Giusto?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, you learn a lot from failures, and you learn a lot from making mistakes. And I think one thing that we all we didn't iron out as best as we could have at the beginning was creating not only kind of expectations for each other, but also, you know, clear roles and dividing those roles up.
Did you listen to our interview before our first interview?
No.
We talk about this, and I was asking you questions about this, ironically. And you're like, we all kind of just, you know, pick up where the other one left off.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting.
And it worked for a while, but then at a certain point, you know, if two people's dreams and aspirations are the exact same thing, in some ways that helps, but in other ways, you know, if you know, Eric, you and I are doing this podcast together, we start this podcast company, you know, Restaurant Unstoppable, we both have the same goal and dream, you know, there's at a certain point, like, one of us has to take the lead. Yeah. You know, and you know, there can't be two voices interviewing and having these conversations with different restaurateurs and chefs. So for us, it was hard because in a lot of ways, you know, Michael and I wanted a lot of the same thing, and maybe we wanted to do certain things that Jim was doing, or maybe Jim, you know, vice versa. So, you know, because I think we didn't have the clearest set of expectations for each other and who is exactly doing what. And, you know, also what you want to do evolves too. And like, you know, I love being a chef. I'm passionate. I love cooking. But I don't want to be in the kitchen the rest of my life. That's not my goal. Yeah. I want to learn. And of course I could be learning in the kitchen nonstop from other cooks and other chefs. That's great. But for me personally, I needed and wanted, a a little bit more. And so I think it's really important that if, going into partnerships with people, like there were so many pros. I learned so much from Michael and Jim and
so there's two Mikes. So Michael is Michael Lombardi.
Yes. Yep.
Your chef friend that you grew with, and there's another Mike.
Yeah.
It gets a little confusing. He was one of the partners of Coda Group, who brought you guys on as partners for SRV.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep.
Just in case that got confusing for the listeners.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many benefits to having partners. First of all, and this is kind of the obvious one, it's like there were 4 of us. There was 3 other people aside from me that were as emotionally invested in the business, as financially invested in the business, and would do anything to make that business succeed. Yeah. So, you can trust, and we could trust each other, which was amazing.
And those are the benefits of a partnership.
Exactly.
There's a reason why one of our core values at Restaurant Unstoppable is collaboration, because you cannot do it alone.
Right.
You literally cannot do it alone. You can't be expected to be good at everything and be the best in the industry today, because you will burn out.
It's impossible.
There's freaks out there. Unless you're a freak, I don't recommend doing it, and those freaks, they burn out, like you pointed out, like Marco Pierre White and some of these people that were your aspirations when you were young, but then you were also quick to say they burnt out. These people might be rock stars, but at the same time, do we really want to recreate that life for ourselves of not really having a life but the restaurant? Is that reasonable?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not
think so.
It's not reasonable. And my goals 5 years ago are different than my goals right now.
Yeah.
And so what did that partnership and having other people as partners in the business and the restaurant help me to where I am now? It really taught me communication. I think communication is so important, and that's not something hasn't been one of my strong suits, growing up as a kid. It just wasn't something that came naturally to me in a lot of ways.
I think you're doing great right now for what it's worth.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But let's pull back some layers on this, because this is huge. It's another one of our core values. We have to communicate. So where do you struggle with communication?
So I've struggled with communication before, where you expect something from somebody, right? Yeah. And just because you talked about it before, right? Okay, Eric, let's say you're my sous chef in the kitchen, right? And you and I have talked about how this is how I want you to break down a fish. Mm-hmm. This is how I want you to fillet it, scale it, score it, and portion it. And I'm going to assume now, we went over it once, I spent 2 hours, dedicated my afternoon to really showing you and whatever. I'm going to assume that you know how to do that now. And and I'm going to let you kind of do it. I'm going to give you the fish, and you're going to fly on your own, and you're going to make a couple of mistakes or whatever. I might expect that if you had a question, you come back to me and you ask me, or I might assume that, I'm going to let you fail a couple of times, and then I'm going to come back. And if the communication, if I didn't come back to you and say, all right, Eric, it's been 2 weeks now, you're still not doing this fish the way that we talked about. Let's sit down and do it again. Let's communicate about that. I wasn't great about that, 4 or 5 years ago. And since this is a really small example of me being in the kitchen doing it, but, I think I'm way better at communicating now, and everybody around me helps. And I think, starting with my wife at home, she's a great communicator. And
thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Good memory.
Yeah, well, I wrote it down.
Okay. Shout out to Sarah. Love you, baby. So, I'm inspired, and I'm learning from all areas of my life. And I think where we are right now at Giusto, we have an incredible team. Executive Chef Kyle Stamps, General Manager Lauren Schaefer, Director of Operations, who was one of my first mentors, Aaron Edwards. Our full management team is just so amazing. Olivia Wordy is our bar manager. We have Katie Ellis as our assistant general manager. We got a great chef team. My brother's in the kitchen as our executive sous chef. And we have to communicate. And, while I may not have a partner per se in this business, I have partner. I look to them as my partners. Yeah. And I treat them like my partners. I try to, and I listen. I value their opinions. I try my best to give them a voice and let them, manage up to me and be honest with me and tell me if I'm making a wrong decision, or, we collaborate together on important decision-making processes. And I learned that from having partners at SRV. So I think if I didn't do that and I tried to just open a restaurant on my own for the first time, no partners, we would have failed miserably.
Yeah. So what does good communication look like? How were you doing it when you kind of painted the picture of how you did it when you first came in. Basically, like you would communicate, and then it would stop. You wouldn't follow up. There was no follow up. So how do you bake that follow up into your business today, where you make sure that there's follow up?
I think the most important thing to start off with communication is having a clear plan and thought and idea to begin with, and being able to articulate that as best as you can in a very direct and understandable way, so that the person that you're speaking to fully understands what you're talking about.
First, start with the end in mind, and then reverse engineer it.
Exactly.
Right? This is where we're going. This is what it's going to look like. Let's go there. And then a week later, is this what we discussed then? And how can I get you there? Yeah,
and creating, setting those expectations. Again, something I learned with having partners. It's okay. This is what I'd like, or let's talk about this. This is our plan. This is our move. This is exactly what I'd like from you from this. Giving clear direction, making sure that person understands, and then the follow up, and then it's checking back in after a couple of days. Was there a deadline to something that we had talked about? Am I missing? Do I need to? Do I have some sort of deliverable that we talked about? Me personally, then I hope that person holds me accountable as well, because I'm human as well, and I might miss a deadline or miss.
And that also needs to be baked into your culture that, hey, if I'm not doing what I say I'm doing, then you need to call me out on. The rules apply to me too.
Absolutely.
Right. I love this. I'm loving the conversation, man. We're going to take a quick break to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back to talk about your journey away from SRV and how you created Giusto. All right, we're back, and let's start talking about your newest little project here. I shouldn't call it a little project. This thing, it's an operation. It's beautiful.
It is a big operation. Yeah, Giusto is no joke, for sure.
For sure. So what inspired this move away from your partners?
So this was... 2000, to paint a little picture here, 2019, my wife and I found out that we were going to have our first baby. So, it was super exciting time. SRV was now 4 years in. We were in a comfortable place in our lives. We had a good routine. We felt good. We were like, let's have a baby, let's do this. And, it's funny. You spend a lot of time with somebody, Michael and I sat down, Michael Lombardi and I sat down together one day in, early summer of 2019. We're like, hey, I got to tell you about something. Michael's like, I want to talk to you. I'm like, great. That's awesome. I want to talk to you too. So we sat down outside on the patio. We weren't open yet for dinner. And he's like, Paige, my wife is pregnant. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. That's great. Wow. Sarah's pregnant too. and it was just so funny. Like, of course we both, we're going through this in our lives at the same time. Because, we both were married. We both were, 4 years into our restaurant, same thing. Like, we're both feeling comfortable and feeling good. And like, it was just, we were both ready at the same time. And that just naturally happened that way. We didn't talk about it like, hey, you trying? Are you going to have
who's going first? My turn or your turn?
Exactly. So it's just so funny. It's so ironic that it happened at the same time. Yeah. So then that was early summer of 2019. Now, we're 3 months in, right? Because you can't tell anybody until they're 3 months. That's important. Yeah. Anything could happen. So now baby's due in about 6 months. Sarah and I spend the next 3 or 4 months, now we're starting to think like, oh my God, okay, we're having a baby. Oh shit, like what does this mean for us? What do we, now we're starting to think about, okay, are we going to stay in our house that we live in now in Quincy at the time? What is that, is she going to keep working at that job? What does the commute look like? Where's daycare? All these things that, we need to make serious decisions on. Where's our family? Oh my God, all of our family's in Rhode Island, like literally. My brother was living in Massachusetts at the time. my parents, all my uncles, aunts, everybody, cousins, Rhode Island. Same with Sarah. So eventually we made the decision that it was best for us to move back home to Rhode Island, and we wanted to raise our son close to family. So then we were toying around with, okay, so what does that commute look like for me personally, living in Rhode Island? Where can we find a house that's close enough to family, but close enough that I don't have a 2.5 hour drive to SRV every single day back and forth? Because I'm not about to drive, work 14, 15-hour days and then drive 4 hours a day. Like there's no sense in that.
Yeah. I've actually, I picked up on this reoccurring theme in your life that like you'd go do something and then home would always call you back.
Yeah.
I can't be here forever. I got to go home. And like with each rendition out, I feel like you got a little bit closer. So, I mean, initially you went to Italy and you came back, then you went to New York, which I think is a little bit further away than Boston. Maybe like a 2-hour drive versus like an hour drive. Yep. And then you're like, well, that's still a little too far away, and I'm gonna go to Paris, and now I'm gonna come back, and but there's always something calling you home. And I Google mapped it. You're only 15 minutes away from North Kingston now.
Yeah.
So you're a lot closer to home. Is that where you live? Is your house in?
We live in Newport.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're about 5 minutes away from the restaurant, which is very great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. We were living in Boston for almost 10 years, and that was home to us.
Yeah.
It was great because it was close enough to home, and it was, we built this life in Boston. Restaurant. Sarah had a great position at a nonprofit called Empath as director of this program, the CFO program. We had really good lives, and we were really happy. But kids change everything, and that's all of a sudden what we thought was the most important thing of our lives, our careers and our lives together, like traveling and having fun. We all of a sudden found ourselves prioritizing, obviously it's so cliche, but prioritizing somebody else over us. And we felt the best thing for that person, for our son, and for our lives together as a family would be to move to Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I was trying to figure out, do I drive back? And, after thinking about that, I was like, there's no way I can put up with that drive. So we decided to, okay, if we're moving to Rhode Island, we're going to find a house. Let's start looking for a restaurant. Let's start looking for a space. And, I had the conversation with my partners, really hard conversation. I think they understood, because they all had families and kids of their own. And, the driving force was, I want to raise my son back home in Rhode Island. And everybody understood that. And I think everybody respected that. And
so the plan was to be closer to family, that was always the driving force, is to be closer to family.
Right.
That's what pulled you away. And I think we did identify there was a lot of overlap where you were before too. There wasn't that clear, I guess, you guys didn't all fall into your own each individual lane. You see a lot in partnerships that work out. You have somebody who's front of house. You have somebody who's back of house. You have somebody who's back of house, who's the numbers person or a lawyer or something like that. And when everybody can divide and conquer, that those partnerships work. It can be difficult when you have literally multiple chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Right? Was that a challenge?
It was a challenge. Yeah. And, in a lot of ways we were stronger together. In some ways we, crossed paths or, had hiccups along the way for sure. So
what do you want to do differently with Giusto? How is Giusto going to be more an extension of you, Chef Kevin O'Donnell?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, if I didn't have the partnership and mentorship, to be honest, of my partners at SRV, I wouldn't have had the confidence to do this on my own. And, while there were a million things that I had never done before opening SRV, because we were very much, when we opened, I was, Michael and I were the chefs. We were in the kitchen. Of course, we learned other things from our other partners about the real estate part of it and the, making the deal and the lease and insurance and, how to, deal with City Hall and renew licenses. All that stuff came over time, but it wasn't a crash course in the same way that
it would have been,
doing it on my own.
Yeah.
So, it gave me the confidence to do it on my own. So I certainly wouldn't have been successful in making it this far at Giusto without seeing as much as I was able to see and, making the mistakes along the way at SRV with the support of partners, being able to like pick you back up. And, that's not to say we haven't made a million mistakes at Giusto, just different mistakes.
Oh, we're gonna get into them.
Yeah.
And we're into the successes as well, I'm sure. So, 2019, your wife Sarah's pregnant. You're saying did Sarah work in the restaurant with you, or
no?
She's a part of Giusto, right?
She's a part of Giusto. She's about to be even more of a part of Giusto. So 2019 we had moved. She was working in a nonprofit. She's still there now, about to leave to come to the restaurant, which I'm so excited about and scared.
Yeah,
shitless, but
I can imagine.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really excited. So yeah, 2019, we found the location at Giusto. I had kind of heard through I had always known about this space. My father was born in Newport, and Sarah and I had both lived in Newport, both together and in separate apartments, throughout our 20s. So Newport has always been a special place to me. So when we were deciding to move back home, our family may not live in Newport right now. But when I come to Newport, I feel, I love Rhode Island. I'm a Rhode Islander. People, it's funny that you say like, oh, you always found your way back. Like that's typical Rhode Islander. Like, people just come back.
Sometimes you gotta get away to realize how good you had it when you left in the first place.
So Rhode Island is great. Newport is special to me because when I come to Newport, especially when I was younger, it always felt like I was coming to a new place. And, it didn't feel like the rest of Rhode Island. It was this really cool, special, beautiful place with different people and travelers. And, it just felt like I was kind of getting away.
Yeah.
So coming and moving to Newport was the move. We knew it. We were like, we're going to move to Newport. We're going to find a place. We're going to find a home. So this location where Giusto is a brand new building, and it's right on the water too, like prime location, like kind of ground zero for just boats in the water and like, people walking around, tourists, whatever. It's an awesome spot. Before this building, it's Hammett's Hotel is what they built here. And then Giusto is a restaurant, independent restaurant that's built in the hotel. It was a parking lot, just a big parking lot in a beautiful location. And it's like, what a waste of beautiful waterfront real estate, and in some ways it was tough for people from Newport because, it's change and it's understandably so. Like not everybody loves change. And, even if it was just a parking lot, they also did like, music. There were concerts here. They threw like an ice skating rink here in the winter. There was some, kind of nostalgic special things that happened in this space over the past 30, 40 years or whatever. But this hotel is beautiful, and they did such a great job with the architecture and the building materials to make it look and feel like it's part of Newport.
I wouldn't have known that this was a new hotel, honestly. Like walking in, you can tell that it's very updated. So I just assumed that it was refurbished or something.
Right.
But when was this built? As you take a sip of water, sorry.
So this was kind of a project in the making since I believe 2017 or 2016.
So are you the first tenant in this space?
Yeah. So the hotel was completed in, I believe it was like May, June of 2020. So when Sarah and I knew that we were going to move home to Rhode Island. Yeah. When Sarah and I knew that we were going to move home to Rhode Island, we started looking at restaurant spaces. We started looking, at the end of the summer, early fall of 2019. Which
hindsight being 2020, man, how lucky were you to start moving away from the restaurant industry? I mean, did you sell your share to the rest of the group before the pandemic?
Yes. Yeah, it was.
It was
a crazy.
I know
time.
It wasn't intentional.
Yeah,
but wow, you dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
because you gave yourself a little bit of a runway. I'm assuming to be able to find the right location. So like I said, it sounds like you got lucky.
The timing was in some ways great, and in some ways the worst timing in the world.
Yeah.
So when we found this space, Giusto at Hammett's Hotel, I met one of the owners of the hotel, Sam Bradner, and he personally walked me through the hotel, the space, showed me the restaurant space, or what they intended to be a restaurant space. At the time, it was just concrete floors and that's it, steel beams. We hit it off. I really respected and still do Sam and his partners at Peregrine Group, who are our landlords. They've been such amazing landlords. We worked over the course of the winter on the lease agreement, and liquor license transfer and all that stuff kind of happened over the winter of.
Where were you transferring the license from if there was no standing space here before?
It's Newport is similar to Boston in that you have to purchase a license from an existing business.
So you can only you can only transfer licenses. You can't create new ones. So
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, not in Newport at least.
Okay. Got it.
So that all took place over the winter. Now we're in 2020. My last day at SRV, I think it was like I can't remember the exact day of the week, but it was the last day of February. So, beginning of March comes now. I have a 3-month-old at home. We're living in Quincy still, and now we're like, we're putting our house on the market. We had just bought a house in Newport, so we're in the process of moving down to Rhode Island. We signed a lease March 8th or 9th of 2020. We had our...
But still, man, timing, because even thinking about the housing market, like you just got in before the housing market. I'm sure this whole area exploded during the housing market.
Oh, yeah. So
between New York and Boston.
Yeah, so we had been looking for a house in Newport, and we found a place that was perfect, had a little apartment attached that was great. So we got that in February of 2020, and we wanted to do that so that we could have like a nice easy move, and we didn't have to like do the, we can't close until we sell this place and move in the same day. Like that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate enough to be able to find this place beforehand. So the move down to Rhode Island was going to be, all right, we're listing our home in Quincy.
Quincy's just west of Boston for listeners aren't familiar with that area. You're fine.
And put it on the market. Open house, like dozens of people at this open house. It was great. Open house was the weekend of March 13th or 14th of 2020. Tons of people came to the open house. We're like, wow, this is going to be great. Like we're going to close this chapter of our lives and be able to move on and move to Rhode Island. No problem at all. And then March 15th, I think it was, we had our city hall meeting in Newport to go over like the licenses and all that. That was the last city hall before the government shut down on March 16th,
Wild.
Which I think was a Monday or Tuesday. And then that's when the housing just stopped. So we had a crazy open house. And then 2 days later, government shutdown, 0 offers.
But also, how much more difficult would it have been to get the licensing for this business?
Oh, it would have been impossible.
Yeah.
Literally, it was the last city hall meeting. So that was a great timing. The worst timing was trying to sell our house because we had this great open house. Tons of people came to buy it, and then the next day, shut down.
But I'm sure that even in the time that things shut down to people starting to realize, oh, this is around for a while. I feel like I'm under house arrest. I want to get out of the city. Quincy is still in the city, but it's still not like people living on top of each other.
Yeah,
there's a little more room.
Definitely tons of space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the timing wasn't great there because we didn't have the luxury of being able to ride it out a little bit.
Yeah.
We just signed a lease. We're moving. We're moving to Rhode Island. Like we got to get rid of this house. So anyhow, we ended up. It all worked out. We ended up moving down to Rhode Island full time. I think like the end of April, beginning of May of 2020, and construction started at the restaurant around the same time, which was on one hand amazing. It was like in the thick of it of the first couple of months of COVID. So it was really scary.
So what were the biggest challenges for you as a solo restaurateur?
I mean, so many challenges. It was, doing a lease without partners. I had
You did point out that you had the mentorship of your previous partners that you went to.
Yeah, I mean, they were amazing, so helpful. But what I knew was really important and valuable is to, there are certain things that you save money on, and you need to, skim here and there and find better deals or whatever. Legal advice and professional advice, like an attorney or tax accountant or whatever, is not something worth skimping on.
No.
And I was fortunate to find a really great attorney who's been an amazing partner with us to just kind of help us along the way. Helped us out big time with this lease and did a great job. So valuable. So, going through the lease, doing that on my own was a huge challenge because I had never done all that on my own.
Yeah, I got to draw attention to an episode I recently recorded, a workshop with David Halbrin. He's a attorney out of New York City, super well-known attorney. We did a whole episode on best practices for lease negotiations. So check out episode 861 if you're listening to this and you're like, I should probably do some homework on that.
I'm going to go back and
We
check
addressed it. Yeah, check it out, please. Keep going.
So other big challenges, as a kind of solo restaurateur, it starts with first of all, it starts with the concept, but the lease is so important, and setting yourself up for the future and thinking 5, 10 years, 15 years down the road, and what does that pro forma and your business plan look like when your rent increases at what year, and what sort of securities do you have, and what is the landlord responsible for versus you responsible for?
What are some aspects of your lease that would have been present to this day if you didn't have an attorney there to advise you against it?
They were able to really first of all, our landlords were great to work with. So there wasn't that much that
they weren't trying to screw you.
No, absolutely not. They're so fair. They're very good people. They want us to succeed.
If you succeed, they succeed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
all ships rise.
But they were able to understand that, you don't know when you're going to open.
There's a pandemic.
Yeah. In the best of times in a restaurant opening,
you still don't know.
You're 3 months behind. Yeah. That's just how
you're doing
it goes.
Good if you're 3 months.
You're doing good. Yeah, exactly. So, being able to help work into the lease that, we're not paying rent until, X date to ensure that we can get the restaurant open and start bringing in cash to, build up the inventory, pay the first round, a couple rounds of payroll, and then let's start talking about rent. So that was really important because rent is a huge expense. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest in a restaurant.
Yeah. What percentage would you say is a good number to be your rent of your total cost?
I think it's impossible to say each year because sales are going to grow each year. Your rent's going to increase each year. But if you can look at like a 10-year average, and this is something that I learned working with my partners at SRV, which is another valuable tool. Yeah. We always looked at like a 6% number, but that number changes. It really depends on your concept. If you are...
Sounds like the Robo-Coo's going.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, if you are a concept that is going to have high labor because maybe you believe in paying people more, higher, you want to make sure everybody has paid time off. You want to have all these benefits, then maybe you need to find a place that the rent is going to be 4% of your sales.
Yeah.
Because your labor is going to be 2% higher. Mm-hmm. 1% here and there, you got to shift it.
A point makes a big difference.
If you're going to do a pizza restaurant and you think your food cost might be 25%, that's great. Then you can throw a couple more percents into labor to take care of the people that work with you and make sure that they have what they need to succeed and to grow financially. So it really depends. But I think if you look at like a 10-year average, sales typically, depending upon the concept, depending upon where you are in the country, they're going to grow pretty fast, like year 2 and 3. And they might like hit a little bit of a plateau at a certain point where...
Law of diminishing returns.
Exactly.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So, the rent increases don't necessarily stop unless you are smart enough or capable enough to know, all right,
have that foresight.
It's gonna pop off in like year 3. I'm gonna crush the sales. We're finally gonna know who we are as a business. But
year 6 and 7,
right?
And they say about every 5 years you have to refresh. You've got about a 5-year runway on things on your status quo. After that 5th year, what's gonna change? How are we gonna stay fresh? How can we bring people back? Because people don't. I mean, it's. Your regulars, they'll be loyal for only so long until there's something else that pulls them away. There's things that can pull them away, so you have to pull them back. It can't just be relationships. Your employees might go on and do different things, Mm-hmm. So you can't rely on your employees to be there for their entire career. Right. Like they're going to grow too. So you got to stay fresh.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing from you is that what you worked into the lease is basically you give yourself a little bit more runway to guarantee success.
Exactly. And we couldn't have done that without our attorneys or finding the right landlord, because that's so important. Your landlord, if you're fortunate enough to buy your own real estate, good for you. That's amazing. That'd be the best case scenario, obviously, but that's not the case for most first, second time restaurant owners. It's, a landlord is your partner in a lot of ways. And if you can't find somebody that you want to work with, because you're going to have to call them for things and they're going to have to call you for things. And, it needs to be somebody that you trust. It needs to be somebody that you respect, that, ask around. If they're landlords and they own other real estate, go ask those businesses. Hey, how's this person as
Anything
a landlord?
I should know? Yeah.
Are they good people?
Yeah.
Are they fair?
If you see people's eyes get really big when you ask the question,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, they're great.
Yeah, they're fine. Yeah. And then look at the building too. That's really important too, because that'll tell the story of how invested, not only financially, but also like emotionally they are, and how much they care about the businesses there. If you go to a building that has 4 retail units and you're thinking about leasing one of those spaces, and the exterior of the building looks not good.
Yeah.
And the driveways or the landscaping is kind of
Things aren't going to change for you.
Nothing's changing for you.
Yeah. But what about specifically the uniqueness of a hotel?
All right. That's an interesting question, because I had never, I'd worked in like a smaller boutique hotel before, or I worked in the restaurant part of the small boutique hotel, and that was great. But, there were certain aspects of it that I was like, oh man, I'm never going to work in, I never want a hotel restaurant. That's not me. That's not what I want. Room service is like a whole nother animal, it's a challenge. When I met Sam from Peregrine, our landlords, in the conversations that I had with them, the hotel that I knew that they were building was a hotel that I knew that I would want to be a part of, because it was different. It was unique. It wasn't just like any other hotel. They didn't want to do room service. They didn't build the rooms to kind of accommodate room service, because we're in Newport. We're in the waterfront of Newport. Why? You don't come to Newport to sit in your hotel room and eat, and you come to enjoy the town, enjoy the city. Come to Giusto, sit at the bar, come in to eat. So that was at the forefront of their kind of design process. It was an intentional move to make the hotel more of like a metropolitan feel, on the waterfront of Newport. It's the same thing. You don't go to New York to like sit in the hotel room. You go to New York to enjoy New York and go out to all the restaurants and museums and whatever. So that was exciting to me, and being a part of this particular hotel, it's beautiful, and they take great care of it, and they care about the facilities. They care about the people. So it, even though it's part of the hotel, it has its own separate entrance. You don't go into the hotel.
I was waiting for it. I was like, get there. I was like, I wanted you to come to it. That's huge. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. People need to know. It almost needs to feel like it's its own entity. And if you're a restaurant in a hotel, you need storefront. You need street visibility, because people will never know you're there. And I noticed that when I was like, good, they got that part. That's huge.
The signage is great. And if you're walking to, this is at Hammett's Wharf. So Hammett's Hotel is big, beautiful blue and kind of brick building at Hammett's Wharf. This is the only building at Hammett's Wharf. So when you're walking down America's Cup Ave, which is like, Main Street in Newport, in between Thames Street and Upper Thames Street, which are the kind of, shopping, the brick alley roads, like the old town of Newport, Hammett's Wharf, as you're walking up to it, it's the big, beautiful, like grand sign that says Hammett's Wharf. Very inviting, big archway that looks, all you can see from the street is just water and sailboats and boats and then the Giusto sign. So walking up from the street, it's inviting, and the first thing you see is Giusto. Yeah.
If you guys are not watching the video portion of this interview, shame on you. Just so you know, we are capturing video, and there'll be B-roll of everything that Kevin's talking about right now. So if you want to see what we're talking about, head over to our YouTube channel, and please subscribe while you're there. We're trying to grow that sucker. Thank you in advance. Sorry for the plug.
No, that's necessary.
Keep going, man. So wait, actually, you're painting the picture of the things you need to consider for real estate and how important that is, the lease negotiation. I want to talk about team. Because you didn't just come here and say, okay, I'm doing this by myself. You put a team together. So take us through that process of putting a team together and what you learned about how to do that.
Yeah. So that's something that, I've always been, I love teaching. I love the teamwork. I've always played, I played sports my whole life as a kid. I just love the team atmosphere of a restaurant. When I knew that we were going to open a restaurant in Newport, there were two people that I called. You start after being in Boston for 9 years. I knew a bunch of people. If I had opened a restaurant in Boston, there could have been 15 people that I would have given a call and been like, hey, let's do this restaurant. Let's open a new restaurant. This is the concept. What do you think? Like, do you want in? Do you want to be a part of the process? Whatever. In Rhode Island, even though I'm from Rhode Island, I hadn't worked in Rhode Island in 15 plus years.
Your professional networks in Boston.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there were two people that I gave a call to. The first was Kyle Stamps, who's our executive chef here. And he and I have known each other for a long time. We've worked together at 3 or 4 different restaurants. He was also a chef in Boston, but he's from Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So, I'd give him a call. We met in Newport one day for lunch, sat down. This was like, in 2019 at a certain point, before the lease was signed, before anything really, like still like conceptually was forming together as a restaurant. Kyle was at ground zero of that process. So we sat down for lunch. It's like, hey, Sarah and I are moving back home to Rhode Island. We want to open a restaurant. He didn't even say anything. He said, I'm in. Yes. That was it. Like, I didn't have to tell him what it is or where it was. He's like, I'm in. Let's do it.
Nice.
So that was invaluable. Like, he has done so much for this restaurant and this team, and built an amazing kitchen team. And like, I will forever be grateful to that man right there. Next call was Aaron Edwards. Aaron Edwards, at the time, he and I were just kind of like spitballing ideas and, looking to him more for advice and mentorship, and, as a friend, but also as a mentor, because he was one of my first really valuable mentors and was always a friend. And we started talking about it, and, he was relatively happy at his position when we were talking about this in 2019. And then all of a sudden that just kind of grew into this, maybe why don't we just open this? Why don't you just come on board and you could be the general manager? You could, Kyle be the chef. And
where was Aaron in his career at this point? Because
he was a general manager of like a nice golf course, country club in Rhode Island.
Got it.
But he'd been a chef his whole life. So the value that one of the values that Aaron brings is, he's done all the different positions and kind of ran all sorts of different properties, anything from like a small Italian trattoria style restaurant, which was where I worked at with him, all the way up to like being the chef of the Navy base in Newport, up to a general manager of a country club. So the different range of operations that he's been a part of, and the knowledge and kind of experience that he brings to the table was invaluable as well. So that was kind of an easy process. And so between Kyle, Aaron, and I, we were the first 3 to like, let's talk about this restaurant. Let's create this restaurant. We'd come to the space. We'd kind of work through the concept together and what do we need? How's the flow going to be? They helped in a little bit with the design. We hired a great interior designer, great architecture firm. And they were able to kind of offer insight and input into that process because they were a part of it since day one.
Yeah. Oh, so you mentioned in your first go at ownership, one of the things you learned was kind of fine tuning the details of the partnership agreement, who's responsible for what in lanes. How did you take that lesson and apply it here? What did you do differently here?
So knowing exactly, I think a big thing, another part of my personal problem when we opened SRV was that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't see my future. I didn't know my end goal. For me, there's never an end goal. It's just like, what is the next goal? I always like to keep evolving and doing more things, but I didn't have a clear vision in my head and understanding of what I wanted in life. And I know that now.
How old were you when you opened SRV?
I was 30.
30? And now you're 36.
37. 38.
38. Damn, man, getting old.
So a lot has changed in 8 years.
You got a lot of clarity during that time.
A lot of clarity, and I feel grounded. I feel having a family. I have an amazing wife and son, and I'm close to my family. So I know what I want. And it's very clear to me, and it was very clear to me before we opened Giusto. So knowing I need an amazing team, and I need to partner with a chef that cares and has just as much passion about teaching and grooming and taking care of people as I do. Kyle's that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I need somebody that same thing in the front of the house, that has the care and the passion and the experience to be able to run the operations and know and understand how a business operates and how to make it, run smoothly and successful. So input Aaron there. So knowing since day one of Giusto what my goals are and what my dreams are, I was able to build the systems and the team so that I'm not the person that's behind the stove every single day. If that's not what I want to do in 10 years, then I need to know how to build a team to be able to support that, both financially because it's going to cost more money to hire more people and to have the talent back there doing it, and to train it and know how to, delegate and create systems that are long lasting and sustainable for everybody, myself and the chefs and the managers and the servers, and every single person.
So what were your goals? What was your dream?
For Giusto specifically, I want this restaurant and this business to be a sustainable place for people to work at, and I want it to be a job that they feel good coming to work, and that they feel valued, that they learn, that they feel appreciated. And that's not like a COVID, outcome. I think a lot of what COVID did was a lot of good, was open everybody's eyes. Yeah. Like, oh my God, we can't treat people like this. Oh my God, we can't pay people this low wage.
We were forced to stop and reflect.
And exactly. And this is something that's always been a dream of mine, is how do I make a business that's both balanced and sustainable financially for me? Like, I have to be able to make a living to do it. But also,
I think it's weird. Like, this industry is kind of profit adverse. Like, we're afraid to admit that we want money, and it's almost like you're guilty if you make profitability a priority. Yeah. I really do think that fiscal responsibility needs to be a core value for all the reasons you just listed, because you need to make sure people feel valued, appreciated, and secure and safe. Like, that takes money. Mm-hmm. To do this, you need money to make people feel, to create opportunity for people, to make people feel valued, to give them little raises within or promotion within the organization. This all takes money. You got to bake fiscal responsibility into your business. So that was important to you. You wanted this. So how did you make sure you were going to get it?
I think having no partners, one of the benefits of that is there's only one person that needs to make a living from the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And I don't need to make a crazy living. I don't need to drive a crazy car. I don't need to have, a mansion house and all this fancy stuff. Like, I want to make an honest living. I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to take trips when I want to take trips and enjoy my life with my family, of course. So, that takes money, but only one person surviving off the bottom line versus 4 people surviving off the bottom line. It's easier to make those decisions because it's coming out of my pocket, and I don't have to go to somebody else and say, I feel like this is the best move for this person, for this team, for this company, for this enterprise, and for the guests too, to pay this person more, or to give them time off, or to give them this benefit, or pay them more, whatever it is. It's easier to do, having only one person in a lot of ways.
So you also mentioned that you were going to bake in systems and processes to guarantee, to ensure you were going to be profitable, to ensure people were going to have an education and feel valued. And get into that. What does that look like? How did you do that?
So, I think it starts with having a big enough team and taking care of those people, everybody, giving them the time, like making sure that everybody has enough time to do their jobs and giving them the tools that they need to do their jobs. So, every restaurant I've ever worked at, and don't get me wrong, we're short staffed right now. We're hiring right now. If you go on Indeed, there's my special plug. We need cooks and servers. We're about to go into the summer. It's like we're always going to be hiring.
We'll share contact information at the end.
But we have a big enough and talented enough team that if somebody needs to be out sick for a week, they don't feel guilty being out sick.
You're not
They're
letting the team down. Yeah.
If a manager wants to take a vacation and it's beautiful out, and that's okay. Guess what? Another manager is not going to work 6 days a week because that's how we built the team. And I've never worked at a restaurant before that's the case, to be honest. It's like somebody goes away, somebody else has to work. But what we did was just build a team big enough to know that if somebody's away or somebody's out sick or somebody is on vacation or whatever, there's somebody else to fill in. So we're, in a lot of ways, we're almost always slightly overstaffed in certain departments, even though we may need like more cooks and servers, but the management team is full. So they have the support that they need. And we also, if we ask them to work a 6-day in an emergency, we pay them for it. And I've never worked
double time, overtime. What does that look like?
It's like about their hour, like if you figure out their hourly rate or whatever, it's like, it's actually.
Is this for salary employees?
For salary employees. So it's like, if you're working 5 days a week and, oh my God, there's a crazy emergency, I need you to come in. Like, we pay you for a 6th day.
It's not expected.
It's not expected.
Yeah. Well, it's not like you're going to get compensated for your time.
Yeah. And I've never been at a restaurant like that either. Salary employees get habitually taken advantage of because a cook shows.
You're on salary.
A cook didn't show up today. Great. Sous chef, you're called in, or you have to stay late now because this person didn't call, and we don't have to pay you more because you're on salary. Yeah. And that's just
not right.
You're expected to work 70, 80 hours a week, and that's just not fair or right.
So are your hours, like, so you have more staff, are you doing shorter shifts, or like how do you build that in a way that we can replicate that?
So that's a good question. We, again, because we're an independent restaurant, there's not a ton of people that are part of that decision-making process with like what the fiscal responsibility of the business. And, okay, we have to open later, or we need to shorten our hours in order to, if this is the team that we have right now, what can we do with this team?
How does the business adapt to us, not we adapt to the business?
Exactly.
Got it.
So that's really important, and making decisions that are best for the team. There's a constant balance that we're always, thought process that we're always going through in our heads, and it's what's best for the team, what's best for the business, and what's best for the guests. So those three things are constantly, that's what we're weighing constantly. And in all of our decision-making process, it's not like, always looking out for the guest, or always looking out for the bank account, or always looking out for the team. The team almost always comes slightly ahead, or we're always finding a way to make it the best of both worlds for everybody. And that's something that I think you get and you learn from working at enough businesses where, like I mentioned earlier, there was a chef owner, a couple different chef owners, because that person's going to run the business slightly different than a bar or a wine sommelier or a general manager owner might do. They might be similar, but they're going to think about things a little differently and how they run the business. And then what does a real estate person do if they own a restaurant? How do they operate it? What does a investor or somebody that's not even in the restaurant do? What is somebody that treats it like a passion project that doesn't care about the money?
What you're talking about is one of the biggest lessons I've learned. It came up in the E-Myth. I think David Scott Peters, who is a restaurant consultant, said it really well. You want to create system-dependent operations, not people-dependent operations. If somebody goes down, the restaurant can't go down with it. And that's what these people who are realtors or investors, they build systems and they plug amazing people into those systems. But if a person goes down, the restaurant still goes. It's hard to do and have high quality, because high quality hinges on creative people and talented people, right? Mm-hmm. Not easy, but it's possible.
Yeah. So it's a balance. It's a constant, let's play this scenario out. Let's think this all the way through. Let's poke holes in this. And it's constantly evolving. And it's constantly evolving.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's dynamic. It's malleable. It's constantly. Today we're going to be 1% better than we were yesterday.
Yep.
Right. So what is your lane today? What is your role? You're not an investor. You're not a real estate person. You're not any of those things. You're a chef.
I'm a chef, but I'm more of I'm like a supporting cast member, I think, is probably the best way to put it. And what I'm trying to do is bring the best out of people and let them, give them the stage and give them the chance to make great decisions and come up with great ideas. And, I'm right there with them. So I'm still, in the kitchen as much as I can be. I'm a part of the menu changes and development with the chefs and helping them, along the way. And how do we come up with like this creative process and create food that is Giusto? I'm a part of that. And, I try to be as much of a part of that in the bar side too with, I love wine. I love beer. I love cocktail. I love all that stuff. I'm passionate about it. I'm not nearly as, equipped like intelligence wise to know all the different grape varietals and et cetera. But
it's overwhelming.
It's exciting to me, and I'm passionate, and I know what we want. We created that wine list together at the beginning with, okay, this is what the wine program looks like at Giusto. We created that together. So it's not like, I'm not a part of the wine. They're not bringing me a glass of wine and say, can we put this on the menu? Absolutely not. Like the people that are in charge of the wine list are amazing and so capable and passionate and smart and know what the end goal is. This is what we want the wine program to be. And they know the wines that are going to fit that program better than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I noticed in the wine program, you do sustainable, where did I put here it is, biodynamic wines. That's a key word that I saw on your website. What does that mean, biodynamic wines?
So biodynamic is not necessarily organic. It could be using organic practices. It's almost like a mindset in how they're treating the earth, the grapes, the vinification process, all along the way. No chemicals. It doesn't have to be hand harvested, but a lot of biodynamic producers are hand harvesting.
Why is that?
I'd have to get somebody in here that really knows, but
that you were talking about earlier?
There's definitely a value. You think about like a machine that's ripping grapes off of vines and what that does to the vines and what
the homes that those
does to the earth
that
that machine is driving over, and how if somebody's walking up to a vine and snipping it with scissors and putting it gently into a basket, like singing a song while they're doing it.
Well, there's also the carbon footprint associated with
absolutely.
That machine.
Totally.
So
the biodynamic, natural kind of wine, it's not 100%, but using, finding the most important thing for us is delicious, and a value to the guests that they're not paying crazy prices for. The tricky thing with a lot of natural wines is they're very inconsistent, or they're not, they're a little kind of not shelf stable, where they might go bad fast, or you might not even know. One bottle might go bad in a batch and the other one won't. So it's tricky to work like that with having all natural wines.
So I guess what I'm curious about, we spent some time earlier today talking about the unique selling propositions of SRV, right? What are the unique selling propositions of Giusto? Like, how are you guys drawing people in? How are you popping? How are you really different than everybody else?
So if you look at Rhode Island as a whole, a lot of Italian immigrants here. I think there's some really great restaurants in Rhode Island. There's a handful of ones that I think are really spectacular, that are doing some really cool, fun, different things outside the box. But I think in general too, like people in Newport specifically, there's a lot of like touristy type restaurants, and that's great. It's a tourist destination. You need restaurants that, if people come to Newport, they're like, all right, I need to have clam cakes, clam chowder, fried calamari, some sort of seafood dish, fish and chips. You're coming to a seaside town. Yeah, exactly. So you need that. That's important to the economy. I think it's part of the DNA of the city, and I don't think it should ever go away. Mm-hmm. But where Newport, is certainly gotten much better the past like 10 years, 5 or 10 years. There hasn't always been a lot of independent restaurants doing different things, and offering an experience that's more of, tells a story about who's behind it, or, the city or the state, or what, there's no story. It's just like, there's clam chowder, there's clam, which is great. Again, like can't discount that.
Which brings us to freestyle Italian cooking.
Yes.
What is that?
So freestyle Italian cooking to me kind of came from, going back to SRV. I've always worked in Italian restaurants, love Italian food. I'm super passionate about it. SRV is a Venetian restaurant. So Venice is a port city in Veneto, the northeast of Italy, all the way up in Italy. It's not even close to Rome. It's nowhere close to Florence. Sicily's like, a whole nother country away, basically. So the cuisine in Venice is very specific, and it's very unique to Italy. We created that restaurant, and we were very true to Venetian cuisine. We kind of colored outside the lines a little bit and went into some of the surrounding regions for inspiration, but the food and the menus and the kind of stylistic approach that we took to the food was very Venetian. And on one hand, that was great because it pushed our creativity. When it's something is so specific, it forces you to learn, which was a ton of fun, because I was kind of always learning about something new about Venetian
the
cooking.
history of that city, yeah.
But at a certain point, there's only so many traditional dishes from Venice, right? Yep. There's only so many plays you can do on liver and onions or risi bisi or bacala mantecato or some of these like really famous Italian Venetian dishes. So at a certain point, it felt kind of restrictive, and it was tough.
You put into a box.
Yeah. And I loved the entire country. When I lived there, I literally traveled the whole country. I would go, it'd be my day off, and I'd say, all right, today I'm going to go to Amatrice in the mountains.
Did you do it on a scooter? Because I could just see you on a scooter driving around.
I wish. I have a scooter now, but no, I had this like little Fiat, like tiny
Even
Fiat
better.
that was my boss's wife's like old car. So it was just like an old beater that was just like driving down the road. It was great. So we'd go, it'd be my day off, and I'd say, I'm going to go to Amatrice. Like, what's an Amatrice? Bucatini or spaghetti alla matriciana, and that's it. That's like what you go there for, and it's a world famous dish. And so I'd go to a town like Amatrice, and I'd research to know like, okay, what are the dishes or what are the wines or whatever that I need to have while I'm there, the cheeses that they make there, the cured meats. And I would just go to as many restaurants as I could, even if it was in one day. I'd go to 3 different trattorias, and I'd eat amatriciana at all 3 back to back, for 3 lunches. And that's how I learned regional foods of Italy. And I would do that all over the place. Piedmont, Sicily, Puglia. I went everywhere and I did that. So I love regional Italian cooking. So it was tough at SRE because I love all the foods of Italy. So for us at Giusto, freestyle Italian, it means a couple things. First of all, it's regional Italian. We draw inspiration from the entire region. But it's not traditional Italian cooking. It's not Italian American cooking. It's not Rhode Island cooking. It's our own cooking. And it's, we're cooking Italian food that we hope you can't get anywhere else. That, we're drawing inspiration. We're bringing Italy and Rhode Island together in our background. Kyle and I, our things that like are nostalgic to us that we love. Maybe it's something that made us feel special growing up as a kid. Like,
to me, that's what cooking is anyway, what cooking should be. Like, you're just throwing things together with what you have. You open the fridge, what needs to get used before it goes bad. Well, we're using that, and what do I need to go get to the store to round this off? And that's what I think cooking should be, and that should be seasonal. Like, cooking should be freestyle. That's the most sustainable way to cook. But when you're using a recipe constantly, like, it takes some of that like creative freedom out of it. It takes the fun out of it.
It totally does. Yeah. And when you're cooking like from passion and from your heart, where you're just it's freestyle. There's no boundaries. You're allowed to color outside the box. We follow certain kind of traditional Italian rules. Like, well, we'd never put cheese with fish or because it overpowers it. There's a reason why, but we don't break any of the sacrilegious Italian rules but we're trying to cook food that, we're not thinking, all right, it has to be from this region or it needs to be X, Y, and Z. No, it needs to be delicious, and it needs to be inspired by Italy, and it needs to have something that tells a story about Rhode Island and where we come from and why it's at Giusto. Yeah. So like our creative thought process with how we come up with the food is is a fun way, is fun, and it's a collaborative process that's exciting, you know.
What about, so that's the food, the unique selling proposition on the food, but what about on the I guess profitability side of things? Like, how are we going to bake profitability into this?
So with, you know, we have very like strict kind of numbers that we're trying to hit. You know, labor, we know that we want to pay people more. We know that we want a larger team to support people's time off and, you know, not overwork people and not stress people out that they can't take a sick day if they're sick, including managers. You know, I've worked at so many restaurants that I was a manager that I never took a sick day because it's like, no, you got the flu, you got a cold, you got whatever. Unless you have like norovirus or something that you're going to get somebody else sick, you show up to work. Yeah. And we're trying to create this place that eliminates that, you know, and in order to do that, it's higher labor. So we know we have higher labor, so we need to have lower cost of goods like food and beverage.
So how do you have low? So if you're pinching penny on the most important thing, some people would argue is that it has to be delicious. How are you doing that? How are you delivering quality at discount?
So talent, I think acquiring talent, you get what you pay for. If that labor is more expensive, then sure, your labor costs are going to be higher, but they're going to be able to produce a higher quality product with less time as well. Okay. So that's really important to us, is finding the right people and paying for that talent,
the experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's super important. And then, you know, we don't mill our own flour here. We make amazing pasta. The person that her name is Nancy. She is a dream. She makes beautiful pasta. She actually worked at Del Posto in New York making pasta there. So super fortunate to be able to work with her, and the rest of the team as well knows how to make pasta. But, you know, we don't mill our flour, so it's not crazy expensive. We're still using good ingredients in it. And, you know, obviously hand making raviolis and gnocchi. And
but I will say this, there are now a lot more, you're starting to see local mills starting to pop up. In that, for a while, you know, General Mills took that job away for a lot of people, you know, but we're recognizing there's a call for it. There's a demand for it. So that's a whole vertical within our industry that's starting to take off again, is local milling. So know where those mills are, you know. You don't have to do the work, but know where to support, how to support those people who are trying to do it the right way.
Yeah. And then, you know, it's also about knowing, so Newport is a seasonal place. Yeah. You know, we're in our second full year now. We opened in September of 2020. We're a little delayed in our opening, right? It's 2020. We were able to open in September. We had to close down in December for COVID. Yeah. The restrictions in place, the cases were rising rapidly. It was just safer for us to close down for a couple of months. So we ended up closing January and February of 2021. We reopened in March. So we haven't seen a full year yet.
As I say, it's been about a year almost.
Yeah. So this January, so 2022 will be our first full year.
Do you think that worked in your favor?
Yes and no. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to tell.
Because you got the liberty of slowly scaling in, whereas I think in other places you have to hit the ground running.
Oh, okay. I see what you're.
You know what I'm saying? Like you got to slowly turn on the nozzle, and it wasn't your fault. You know what I'm saying?
We had when we opened up, we were at 50% occupancy, so we had like the longest soft opening in restaurant history. It was a 4-month.
People are just happy to be out. They're like, you spit in my face for all I care. I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. So it was, all things considered, it was super hard. But the first 4 months that we were open were fairly smooth, and it was like, oh my God, we just opened a restaurant in the middle of the pandemic, and it was successful, and we survived, and we did it, and the team is great, and the feedback is amazing from the town. It was amazing. Yeah. So closed down, reopened. Now we're open for the first summer in Newport, and it was like 2021 March. Gloves come off. Everybody's like, we got vaccines. We're going back. COVID's over. March 2021. It doesn't exist. It's a thing of the past. So people are going nuts, and we were crazy busy, right from the gate. And last summer was really hard because, like so many other businesses, but restaurants especially, in 2021, it was like the great labor shortage of the century. Yeah. And it was also our first summer of this. Yeah. So everybody, you're the hot spot. It was hard. Yeah. It was really hard. So now going into this season with the team that we have, I feel so, we're ready. We are a great restaurant, I think. And we have a great team. We're capable. Everybody's smart and passionate, and experienced and ready. and optimistic too. And
Yeah. Kevin, is there anything we have not discussed up to this point that you want to make sure comes out of today's interview?
I think we touched on like what makes this restaurant different, and we talked a little bit about the food. We talked a little bit about the wine program and what we do as a business to make it financially successful as well. But the community aspect of it is really important, and I think that's something that's always at the forefront of our minds. It's one of our core values is being part of the community, and Newport is an amazing city, and it's never going away. It's not a recession could come or anything could come, and it's on the water. It's beautiful. Yeah. The history, the architecture, the people here, the other businesses that are around. We just did a fundraiser for World Central Kitchen last week, and in 2 hours we raised over $8,000.
Wow.
Getting other restaurants and other businesses together, and the sense of community that we have in this town is like inspiring.
Yeah.
And it makes me look forward to the future of being here in Newport and the opportunity that is here. So I think another thing, like anybody that's listening that wants to open their own business, location has always been something that's the key thing, location. But obviously that's from a business perspective. What's the foot traffic like? What is the visibility like? Is there parking, et cetera? All those things play into the business, but what is the community like? What community do you want to be a part of? Who is your clientele going to be coming in here? The people that come into our restaurant that support us year round are some of the best people, and so generous and so appreciative of having a new restaurant like Giusto, because we are different. We're not like a lot of the other restaurants on the waterfront. And I think a lot of people, I was afraid that we might scare Rhode Islanders or Newport locals away because we were different, but we've been welcomed with open arms, and I'm forever grateful and so thankful that people understand us and appreciate us and see all the hard work that the team puts into like opening the restaurant.
Yeah. And Chris Dimmick, past guest on the show, a good friend, tapped into this with his restaurant. He mentioned this during his restaurant. He opened Sueño in Dayton, Ohio. And he said, don't be afraid to do crazy shit if you're in the middle of nowhere, because people look into their phone and they see that crazy shit. They're used to that crazy shit. They want that crazy shit. They hate that they don't have that crazy shit. So be the crazy shit, and you'll be like, and have that juxtaposition, because you're gonna draw people in. They want that. They want to. They want to experience it beyond their phone, and be that for them. So the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. You've definitely inspired us, man. You've definitely empowered us. You shared some great advice. How have you transformed? Who are you today versus the man you were when you first, let's just say over the past 7 years? How have you transformed?
Yeah. I think that I'm much more understanding of I can't do everything myself. And, I've always been, I think, a chef's mentality. And, I still, not to say I don't struggle with this sometimes, because sometimes I take off more than I can chew. But you have to ask for help. You have to ask for support, and you have to know how to delegate and how to do it in a constructive way. And I think that I've learned so much and grown so much the past 7 or 8 years since my first time opening a restaurant when I was 30, that, I think that I'm much more effective and able to do way more now, because it's not because I can do more myself. It's because I've learned how to delegate, how to let go of certain things that, I can't do it all myself.
Yeah.
So that's been really helpful.
So I believe in transforming the industry transforming one person at a time, by sharing this knowledge, by empowering them. We will transform the industry, but ultimately the goal is to transform the world. How can we be better? What can the restaurant industry do better to be a part of the solution moving into the future?
That's a great question. I think that, treating people better and honest and fair and transparency is so important. And, having a balance, like sometimes this decision might be better for the bank account, and maybe it's not better for this person, or it's not better for the guest, but if we don't do this for the bank account, this restaurant's not gonna be around to be better for the team or be better for the guests. And I think that we need to do a better job of inclusion and having people offer their opinions and insights and not being afraid to be honest with their coworkers, their bosses. So, being mentors and leaders and kind of like cultivating that is so important to be able to allow people to be honest.
There's a term for it. What I believe you're saying is open book management, is being transparent with everything that you do in the business, why you do it. But the beauty of what happens with that is now you're opening yourself up to the potential energy of all the minds that you have on your team. Like a brain is a battery. And if you can hook your battery up to all those other batteries, how much stronger are you together? You're cutting yourself short by not sharing this knowledge, by not being open. Somebody might have a solution that's good for the bank account that you never would have considered because you don't have their perspective. Yep. If you open yourself up to these people, they're going to share perspective and they're sharing potential energy, creative energy. We all are creative. We can all solve problems. Open yourself up to that, man.
Totally.
Great stuff. I love it. This has been a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for reconnecting with me, getting me down here to Rhode Island. It was a pleasure to come down and visit you. This is exactly what I want to do going forward into the future is less feeding of the funnel and more going back to the people I've already connected with to go deeper. And you've done that for us. Thank you so much. So
appreciate your time.
Oh man, I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So how can we connect if we're feeling inspired, if we're in Rhode Island, or maybe we're on the other side of the country, but we don't give an F, we want to come hang out with you, we want to come work for you. What's the best way to connect?
Take a look on Instagram. Follow us. We're Giusto Newport. So
how do you spell that?
GIUSTONEWPORT. So Giusto Newport. Check out our website, giustonewport.com.
Not Giusto.
Not Giusto.
Okay.
Not Gusto, Gusto, Guisto. So yeah, it's Giusto. And Giusto means just right.
I love it. Well, this interview has been just right. Thank you so much, Chef Kevin. I almost forgot to have you call somebody out.
Oh, man.
That would have been a terrible thing. Who do you respect and admire in the industry and believe would make a great guest mentor like you made for us today?
This person that came to mind, I actually don't know him personally, but when I knew I was going to be coming back home to Rhode Island, I've always had my eye on his restaurants. Right now, he has one in Providence called Oberlin, and I've always had respect for him for what he did and continues to do in Providence and in Rhode Island. He's doing something different. He's what he does with food and how he takes care of people and what he's not afraid to say publicly about his views on anything is Ben Suckle. So I think you should definitely reach out to him. And he's the owner and chef of Oberlin in Providence, Rhode Island. Ben, it's a great restaurant. And they do it right.
Awesome, Ben. Look out. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And again, thank you so much, Chef Kevin. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you, Eric.
Cheers. We'll cut it there. Well done, sir.